Theory of mind is the ability to attribute mental states, beliefs, intents, desires, pretending, knowledge, etc., to oneself and others, and to understand that others have beliefs, desires, intentions, and perspectives that are different from one's own. Deficits can occur in people with autism spectrum disorders, schizophrenia, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, as well as alcoholics who have suffered brain damage due to alcohol's neurotoxicity. Although philosophical approaches to this exist, the theory of mind as such is distinct from the philosophy of mind. Definition: theory of mind is a theory insofar as the mind is not directly observable. The presumption that others have a mind is termed a theory of mind because each human can only intuit the existence of their own mind through introspection, and no one has direct access to the mind of another. It is typically assumed that others have minds by analogy with one's own, and this assumption is based on the reciprocal social interaction, as observed in joint attention, the functional use of language, and the understanding of others' emotions and actions. Having a theory of mind allows one to attribute thoughts, desires, and intentions to others, to predict or explain their actions, and to posit their intentions. As originally defined, it enables one to understand that mental states can be the cause of, and thus be used to explain and predict, the behavior of others. Being able to attribute mental states to others and understanding them as causes of behavior implies, in part, that one must be able to conceive of the mind as a generator of representations. If a person does not have a complete theory of mind, it may be a sign of cognitive or developmental impairment. Theory of mind appears to be an innate potential ability in primates, including humans, that requires social and other experience over many years for its full development. Different people may develop more or less effective theories of mind. Empathy is a related concept, meaning the recognition and understanding of the states of mind of others, including the beliefs, desires, and particularly emotions. This is often characterized as the ability to put oneself into another's shoes. Recent neuroethological studies of animal behavior suggest that even rodents may exhibit ethical or empathetic abilities. Neo-Piaget theories of cognitive development maintain that theory of mind is a byproduct of a broader hypercognitive ability of the human mind to register, monitor, and represent its own functioning. Research on theory of mind in humans and animals, adults and children, normally and atypically developing, has grown rapidly in the 35 years since Premick and Guy Woodruff's paper, "Does the Chimpanzee Have a Theory of Mind?" The emerging field of social neuroscience has also begun to address this debate, by imaging the brains of humans while they perform tasks demanding the understanding of an intention, belief, or other mental state in others. An alternative account of theory of mind is given within operant psychology and provides significant empirical evidence for a functional account of both perspective taking and empathy. The most developed operant approach is founded on research on derived relational responding and is subsumed within what is called relational frame theory. According to this view, empathy and perspective taking comprise a complex set of derived relational abilities based on learning to discriminate and respond verbally to ever more complex relations between self, others, place, and time, and through established relations. Philosophical and psychological roots. Contemporary discussions of Tom have their roots in philosophical debate, most broadly, from the time of Descartes' second meditation, which set the groundwork for considering the science of the mind. Most prominent recently are two contrasting approaches in the philosophical literature to theory of mind, theory and simulation theory. The theory theorist imagines a veritable theory, folk psychology, used to reason about others' minds. The theory is developed automatically and innately, though instantiated through social interactions. It is also closely related to person perception and attribution theory from social psychology. The intuitive assumption that others are minded is an apparent tendency we all share. We anthropomorphize non-human animals, inanimate objects, and even natural phenomena. Daniel Dennett referred to this tendency as taking an intentional stance toward things. We assume they have intentions to help predict future behavior. However, there is an important distinction between taking an intentional stance toward something and entering a shared world with it. The intentional stance is a detached and functional theory we resort to during interpersonal interactions. A shared world is directly perceived and its existence structures reality itself for the perceiver. It is not just automatically applied to perception, it in many ways constitutes perception. The philosophical roots of the relational frame theory account of Tom arise from contextual psychology and refer to the study of organisms interacting in and with a historical and current situational context. It is an approach based on contextualism, a philosophy in which any event is interpreted as an ongoing act inseparable from its current and historical context, and in which a radically functional approach to truth and meaning is adopted. As a variant of contextualism, RFD focuses on the construction of practical, scientific knowledge. This scientific form of contextual psychology is virtually synonymous with the philosophy of operant psychology, development, the study of which animals are capable of attributing knowledge and mental states to others. As well, the development of this ability in human ontogeny and phylogeny has identified several behavioral precursors to a theory of mind. Understanding attention, understanding of others' intentions, and imitative experience with other people are hallmarks of a theory of mind that may be observed early in the development of what later becomes a full-fledged theory. In studies with non-human animals and pre-verbal humans, in particular, researchers look to these behaviors preferentially in making inferences about mind. Simon Baron-Cohen identified the infant's understanding of attention in others, of social skill found by 7 to 9 months of age, as a critical precursor to the development of theory of mind. Understanding attention involves understanding that seeing can be directed selectively as attention, that the looker assesses the seen object as of interest, and that seeing can induce beliefs. Attention can be directed and shared by the act of pointing, a joint attention behavior that requires taking into account another person's mental state, particularly whether the person notices an object or finds it of interest. Baron-Cohen speculates that the inclination to spontaneously reference an object in the world as of interest and to likewise appreciate the directed attention and interests of another may be the underlying motive behind all human communication. Understanding of others' intentions is another critical precursor to understanding other minds, because intentionality, or aboutness, is a fundamental feature of mental states and events. The intentional stance has been defined by Daniel Dennett as an understanding that others' actions are goal-directed and arise from particular beliefs or desires. Both 2- and 3-year-old children could discriminate when an experimenter intentionally versus accidentally marked a box as baited with stickers. Even earlier in ontogeny, Andrew N. Meltzoff found that 18-month-old infants could perform target manipulations that adult experimenters attempted and failed, suggesting the infants could represent the object manipulating behavior of adults as involving goals and intentions. While attribution of intention and knowledge is investigated in young humans and non-human animals to detect precursors to a theory of mind. Gagliardi et al. Have pointed out that even adult humans do not always act in a way consistent with an attributional perspective. In the experiment, adult human subjects made choices about baited containers when guided by confederates who could not see which container was baited. Recent research in developmental psychology suggests that the infant's ability to imitate others lies at the origins of both a theory of mind and other social cognitive achievements like perspective taking and empathy. According to Meltzer, the infant's innate understanding that others are like me allows it to recognize the equivalence between the physical and mental states apparent in others and those felt by the self. For example, the infant uses his own experiences orienting his head, eyes toward an object of interest to understand the movements of others who turn toward an object. That is, that they will generally attend to objects of interest or significance. Some researchers in comparative disciplines have hesitated to put a too ponderous weight on imitation as a critical precursor to advanced human social cognitive skills like mentalizing and empathizing, especially if true imitation is no longer employed by adults. A test of imitation by Alexandra Horowitz found that adult subjects imitated an experimenter demonstrating a novel task far less closely than children did. Horowitz points out that the precise psychological state underlying imitation is unclear and cannot by itself be used to draw conclusions about the mental states of humans. Language. There is evidence to believe that the development of theory of mind is closely intertwined with language development in humans. One meta-analysis showed a moderate to strong correlation between performance on theory of mind and language tasks. One might argue that this relationship is due solely to the fact that both language and theory of mind seem to begin to develop substantially around the same time in children. However, many other abilities develop during this same time period as well, and do not produce such high correlations with one another nor with theory of mind. There must be something else going on to explain the relationship between theory of mind and language. Miller posed a few possible explanations for this relationship. One idea was that the extent of verbal communication and conversation involving children in a family could explain theory of mind development. The belief is that this type of language exposure could help introduce a child to the different mental states and perspectives of others. This has been suggested empirically by findings indicating that participation in family discussion predicts scores on theory of mind tasks, as well as findings showing that deaf children who have hearing parents and may not be able to communicate with the parents much during early years of development tend to score lower on theory of mind tasks. Another explanation of the relationship between language and theory of mind development has to do with a child's understanding of mental state words, such as think and believe. Since a mental state is not something that one can observe from behavior, children must learn the meanings of words denoting mental states from verbal explanations alone, requiring knowledge of the syntactic rules, semantic systems, and pragmatics of a language. Studies have shown that understanding of these mental state words predicts theory of mind in 4-year-olds. Lastly, a third hypothesis is that the ability to distinguish a whole sentence from its embedded complement and understand that one can be true while the other can be false is related to a theory of mind development. Recognizing these sentential complements as being independent of one another is a relatively complex syntactic skill and has been shown to be related to increased scores on theory of mind tasks in children. Empirical investigation. Whether children younger than 3 or 4 years old may have a theory of mind is a topic of debate among researchers. It is a challenging question, due to the difficulty of assessing what prelinguistic children understand about others and the world. Tasks used in research into the development of Tom must take into account the world of the pre-verbal child. False belief task. One of the most important milestones in theory of mind development is gaining the ability to attribute false belief. That is, to recognize that others can have beliefs about the world that are diverging. To do this, it is suggested, one must understand how knowledge is formed, that people's beliefs are based on the knowledge, that mental states can differ from reality, and that people's behavior can be predicted by the mental states. Numerous versions of the false belief task have been developed, based on the initial task done by Wimmer and Perner. In the most common version of the false belief task, children are told or shown a story involving two characters. For example, the child is shown two dolls, Sally and Anne, who have a basket and a box, respectively. Sally also has a marble, which she places into her basket, and then leaves the room. While she is out of the room, Anne takes the marble from the basket and puts it into the box. Sally returns, and the child is then asked where Sally will look for the marble. The child passes the task if she answers that Sally will look in the basket where Sally put the marble. The child fails the task if she answers that Sally will look in the box where the child knows the marble is hidden, even though Sally cannot know this, since she did not see it hidden there. To pass the task, the child must be able to understand that another's mental representation of the situation is different from their own, and the child must be able to predict behavior based on that understanding. Another example is when a boy leaves chocolate on a shelf and then leaves the room. His mother puts it in the fridge. To pass the task, the child must understand that the boy upon returning holds the false belief that his chocolate is still on the shelf. The results of research using false belief tasks have been fairly consistent. Most normally developing children are able to pass the tasks from around age 4. Notably, while most children, including those with Down syndrome, are able to pass this test, in one study, 80% of children diagnosed with autism were unable to do so. Also, adults can experience problems with false beliefs. For instance, when they show hindsight bias, defined as the inclination to see events that have already happened as being more predictable than they were before they took place. For instance, in an experiment by Fishoff in 1975, adult subjects who were asked for an independent assessment were unable to disregard information on actual outcome. Also, in experiments with complicated situations, when assessing others' thinking, adults can be unable to disregard certain information that they have been given. Unexpected contents. Other tasks have been developed to try to solve the problems inherent in the false belief task. In the unexpected contents, or Smarties task, experimenters ask children what they believe to be the contents of a box that looks as though it holds a candy called Smarties. After the child guesses Smarties, it is shown that the box in fact contained pencils. The experimenter then recloses the box and asks the child what she thinks another person, who has not been shown the true contents of the box, will think is inside. The child passes the task if she responds that another person will think that Smarties exist in the box, but fails the task if she responds that another person will think that the box contains pencils. Gopnik and Astington found that children passed this test at age 4 or 5 years. Other tasks. The false photograph task is another task that serves as a measure of theory of mind development. In this task, children must reason about what is represented in a photograph that differs from the current state of affairs. Within the false photograph task, either a location or identity change exists. In the location change task, the examiner puts an object in one location, whereupon the child takes a Polaroid photograph of the scene. While the photograph is developing, the examiner moves the object to a different location, allowing the child to view the examiner's action. The examiner asks the child two control questions. When we first took the picture, where was the object? And, where is the object now? The subject is also asked a false photograph question. Where is the object in the picture? The child passes the task if she correctly identifies the location of the object in the picture and the actual location of the object at the time of the question. However, the last question might be misinterpreted as, where in this room is the object that the picture depicts? And therefore some examiners use an alternative phrasing. To make it easier for animals, young children, and individuals with classical autism to understand and perform theory of mind tasks, researchers have developed tests in which verbal communication is emphasized, some whose administration does not involve verbal communication on the part of the examiner, some whose successful completion does not require verbal communication on the part of the subject, and some that meet both of the foregoing standards. One category of tasks uses a preferential looking paradigm, with looking time as the dependent variable. For instance, 9-month-old infants prefer looking at behaviors performed by a human hand over those made by an inanimate hand-like object. Other paradigms look at rates of imitative behavior, the ability to replicate and complete unfinished goal-directed acts, and rates of pretend play. Early precursors. Recent research on the early precursors of theory of mind have looked at innovative ways at capturing pre-linguistic infants' understanding of other people's mental states, including perception and beliefs, using a variety of experimental procedures. Studies have shown that infants in the second year of life have an implicit understanding what other people see in what they know. A popular paradigm used to study infants' theory of mind is the violation of expectation procedure, which predicates on infants' tendency to look longer at unexpected and surprising events compared to familiar and expected events. Therefore, their looking times measures would give researchers an indication of what infants might be inferring, or their implicit understanding of events. One recent study using this paradigm found that 16-month-olds tend to attribute beliefs to a person whose visual perception was previously witnessed as being reliable, compared to someone whose visual perception was unreliable. Specifically, 16-month-olds were trained to expect a person's excited vocalization and gaze into a container to be associated with finding a toy in the reliable looker condition or an absence of a toy in the unreliable looker condition. Following this training phase, infants witnessed, in an object search task, the same person either searching for a toy in the correct or incorrect location after they both witnessed the location of where the toy was hidden. Infants who experienced the reliable looker were surprised and therefore looked longer when the person searched for the toy in the incorrect location compared to the correct location. In contrast, the looking time for infants who experienced the unreliable looker did not differ for either search locations. These findings suggest that 16-month-old infants can differentially attribute beliefs about a toy's location based on the person's prior record of visual perception.